Live and direct, live and a date no jive.
Legalize it.
I mean, how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, great, Barry, a reefer.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Koala Podcast. I've got Brian Vicente on the call today. Hopefully it'll go well. We're talking across oceans. Brian, thanks for coming back and talking to us about the Colorado Hemp Beverage Coalition launch. That is it this week?
Well, we're doing our event this week, but we've been around for about 6 months, gaining momentum week over week.
Colorado, how does it compare with the rest of the US in terms of what its hemp rules currently are, and how does that obviously apply to the newest part of the HSC equation, which is everybody drinking the stuff?
Yeah, so it's really kind of remarkable. I mean, as you know, Colorado was the first state to legalize cannabis, and I helped run that campaign, write the language. And since then, we've been kind of lapped by other states that have not only legalized cannabis, but have really allowed this explosion of hemp-derived drinks, right? And so you have states like Minnesota and Kentucky and Tennessee where you can go into a bar and order a beer, or you can order a hemp-derived THC drink, right? And so we are attempting to modernize things in Colorado to kind of reestablish our throne as leaders in this space. And so we formed this coalition to help, really modernize it.
And I mean, I suppose the first question you sort of covered it in that first sentence was you can drink those beverages alongside alcohol. Is that what you're looking to do in Colorado as well?
Yeah, 100%.
And is it 21? Is it 21 as well?
You have to be 21. Yeah. And our goal is very, very simple. We just want these hemp drinks, THC drinks, to be able to be sold wherever alcohol is sold in the state of Colorado. So bars, restaurants, the Broncos Stadium, what have you. And, other places are doing this, other states are doing this. The consumers want it. Currently in Colorado, you can sell these beverages next to alcohol, but you can only sell them with 1.75 milligrams of THC, which is not really what the consumers want. The consumers are looking for 5 or 10 or 3, right? So we just want to raise the cap, right? And sort of, get caught up with the rest of the country.
How are the caps doing in other states around the country? Because you guys work in literally every state in the country. I mean, do you believe any of them are a bit silly and should be brought down rather than up? I mean, because sometimes I think that if you're selling, I don't know, I don't even know what it can go up to, 55%, say something silly like that. I mean, should there be a distinction between a beer and a wine and then a spirits?
I think there should. And the fun thing, Sean, is we're figuring this out on the fly, right? I believe the future of cannabis consumption involves probably primarily beverages, right? In our country, right? People are moving away from smoking and vaping towards beverages. They're used to consuming intoxicants via beverage, whether that's alcohol or Red Bull or coffee. And so you have different states that are really trying to figure this out. Some of them have zero tolerance for the drinks. Some of them have low caps like Colorado. Some have pretty high caps like 25 milligrams for Tennessee. I think that might be too much for the public, right?
Do we even know, we can't compare to alcohol, but do we know what 25% is in alcohol terms? Is that like 40? Have there been any studies like that trying to work out what that is? Is that a bourbon or is that a fortified wine? I mean, I know that's why I find it a bit weird putting the two things together, because they are entirely different compounds.
It's fascinating. So we're attempting to regulate cannabis via an alcohol framework, but it is ultimately a different substance scientifically and affects the user in different ways. Some of those ways very positive. It's not addictive like alcohol. It doesn't have an overdose. You don't die when you consume too much. So we're getting to the bottom of it. The general take is that about 5 to 10 milligrams of THC in a drink is roughly like a strong beer, like an IPA or something, right? So, but it
And
may
does that affect
impact
you in
you
the same?
differently.
Because I'm out of the States and I'm not visiting the States anytime in the near future for a whole other conversations that we won't have in this podcast. But
Fair enough.
it is what I was about to say is that it's I find it just hard to know, not being a old-fashioned cannabis smoker, is that the same
Yeah.
as an edible, for example, in terms of you consume it, does it take that long to have an effect like an edible?
It's getting much closer to the onset of a beer,
Yeah.
right? So when you sip a THC drink, it's affecting you closer and closer to how alcohol does, as opposed to like a brownie that might take an hour to hit.
Yeah.
Some of that's just advancement in sort of nanoscience and uptake that a lot of these companies are engaging in. But for us, that's a good thing. You know, consumers are used to feeling the effect of that coffee or the effect of that beer pretty quickly, and cannabis drinks are really getting there. So it's positive.
And then what are the rules? Are okay, you're selling them side by side. You can't call them a kid, they're 21, but a 22-year-old comes in. I'll have 2 shots of bourbon, I'll have a couple of beers, and then I'll knock it down with a couple more THC drinks afterwards. Ha- have any of the other states created rules about mixing alcohol and THC based drinks? And if so, what are they, and how do you enforce them in that sort of bar environment?
Yeah, and I know exactly what you're asking, so I will address it, but it'll take me a second to get
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
But basically, everywhere does not allow alcohol and cannabis to be mixed into the same drink. And I don't think that's what you're asking, but I did want to be clear
Yeah,
on
yeah, no,
that.
well, that's
You
interesting because
can't
I mean, it
combine,
wasn't what I was
right?
asking, but that's a
You
good
can't
thing to
have the
know, I think.
cannabis vodka cocktail. That's illegal, right? Nevada is the only place I'm aware of that has attempted to say, hey, if you're having a cannabis drink, you have to wait an hour before you go to the same bar to get an alcohol drink, or vice versa. Everywhere else, and this includes 4,000 restaurants and bars in Minnesota, I can go up and order a Budweiser. 10 minutes later, I can go up and order a cannabis drink. The sky hasn't fallen, and that's the model that we think makes sense.
Yeah, because I mean, to me, this consuming these beverages in a eating environment makes a much more sense, because if you eat something, it's going to calm down the effect. Whereas if
Yeah.
you know, people do like to test the rules. I mean, look, I'm English, so if you try to introduce THC into pubs in England, it would look like Hogarth's London pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the future. I think it's sort of civilized path forward where we can recognize that adults 21 and older can make responsible choices, right? And in fact, they should be able to buy cannabis and consume it right next to their friend who's drinking a bourbon, right? And I think it's going to actually open up a lot of new consumers to cannabis. If I go to a happy hour and the only option is wine or beer, right? That's probably what I'm going to drink. But if there's
Yeah.
an option to have a cannabis beer, people like my mom that wouldn't go into a dispensary or haven't smoked in 70 years, wouldn't might
Boycott
want to
that.
try.
Yeah,
I want to try this opportunity. And I think that that'll be good for the cannabis industry writ large and good for society for people to have an option to use cannabis instead of alcohol.
So, I mean, look, we talked about the consumption side of it. Let's talk about the policy, legislation, business side of it. What are you hoping to achieve in what period of time? And I presume once you get legislation through the House, you're not going to knock it on the head. I mean, look at you, if you had a 5-year plan, where would we hope to be in 5 years? And are you trying to really more so build an industry rather than just allow people? Obviously, you'll only build an industry if people consume, but there's a lot more to the equation than that, isn't there?
Sure. Yes, I believe, a long horizon here. I think in 10 years, we'll see these drinks sold anywhere alcohol is sold in the country, right? From Alabama to Alaska. I believe that this will be the normalization of cannabis. And so we're trying to sort of, brick by brick, get there, right? And Colorado is our current focus. It's where I'm located, although we do work across the country. But we have in just 6 months, pulled together a bunch of industry leaders, and found a senator who will run our bill at the legislature. We've met with the governor's office and the Department of Revenue and all these stakeholders. And so we're going to have a bill and we're going to run it in January. We hope it'll pass by May. And, we've gotten good indications that this will be, viewed favorably by the legislature, although it's always a fight against prohibitionists. But and at that point, when that law is signed into effect, businesses, restaurants, bars, movie theaters, wherever, would have the opportunity to start stocking these beverages, 5 to 10 milligram or lower THC hemp beverages, federally legal. And really, the joy here, Sean, has been meeting with restaurant owners and brewers that are saying, "Hey, man, we're hemorrhaging jobs. I can barely keep the lights on. We really wish we had another product to sell.
Yeah.
People are asking about these drinks. Can we help support your effort?" So it's been, I think, really, it's going to be an economic stimulus for the state as well as the country.
And do you see it growing as a cottage industry, like the craft beer industry to start with, and then M&A coming in from the soda side of business and the alcohol side? I mean, how do you perceive that moving forward? I mean, the big companies have sort of dipped their toe, and then it seemed to me they did it about 18 months, 2 years ago, and then sort of took their toe out of the water again and have left it to the smaller brewers to investigate it, or cannabis companies who want to get into beverages. How do you see the sector developing? In what way would you prefer best to see it?
Yeah. So we've seen an absolute explosion in interest in the last 6 months or year in these beverages. And that includes from smaller brewers, restaurants, but also from the largest alcohol industry conglomerates in the globe. I know this because they call my firm and we talk about, what's the market and who's an acquisition target and all that type of stuff. So every company you can think of and that's big in alcohol space is looking at this. It's generally the alcohol folks that we're talking to. And honestly,
they're talking to you. They're obviously talking to state houses. Are those really big end of town alcohol companies sort of showing a bit of muscle on this in DC as well?
They're starting to. Yeah, absolutely. You have like the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America, which is a giant alcohol trade association, publicly lobbying, putting out white papers on this.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those. Yeah,
knocking on the doors in DC. So it's this muscle that we haven't seen before among the cannabis crowd. Right now, will those folks dominate this field? I mean, perhaps. Will there be a Starbucks or a Budweiser of cannabis drink? Probably
down the line. Yeah, I mean,
down the line,
US, that's what happens, isn't it?
Yeah, and but I don't think that will block out the opportunity for smaller beverage companies to produce these products and get them out there.
The implication of this is because there's all this talk of the FDA, the rescheduling. Do you think that really it's beverages that's going to push that over the line? Sometime in the next X, because I've given up, and I'm sure you have as well, given up trying to apply a year, month sort of date to this sort of thing, because everybody always says yes, and it just gets pushed out, and then somebody's, what have we got? I think we got Senate or House Republicans at the moment pushing back against Trump's only comment. He hasn't even really said anything. He's just vaguely commented like he always does about something. So there's that push pull in the center, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I do think, like you, I've been tracking this issue for a long time. I think it's my 21st year of working full time.
You're double me. You've doubled me.
Yeah, and for a long time, there was just a straight line. Like reform advocates like myself thought there was a single strategy. That single strategy is changing state law, and that will create pressure at the federal government level. But in the last couple of years, in my opinion, there's been some force multipliers that have come along, these different angles that are coming in. One of them is the beverage piece, and one of them is tribal, right? Native American dispensaries.
That's a big story this year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's giant. So you have those two pushing at the federal level in addition to state level reform. I think it's going to, again, they're force multipliers. They will increase the time it gets for, they will shorten the time it takes for us to get real reform at the federal level. When that is, I'm not exactly sure, but we can't ignore those as contributing to more sane policies.
And you talk about the general F&B industry looking for these products. What about the slightly struggling cannabis retail industry? Are they pretty desperate to try and get these things over the line as well? Or do they see it as competition to existing product creators?
They're of mixed mind, honestly. And I've been meeting with dozens of dispensary owners, trade associations about this because they're used to having a monopoly on
Well,
cannabis
yeah,
sales.
that's why
Right?
I asked. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so, but if you look at that monopoly, they sell almost no drinks. Very, very few. It's like less than 1% of their sales are drinks, right? It's all flour and other stuff, right? So we're trying to chat with those folks, and I think they're beginning to understand like what we're talking about is this hemp market. It's outside of that. You can participate in that market if you want, cannabis business owner, you can start producing hemp drinks or what have you. But that will onboard people to dispensaries. That will introduce folks to cannabis for the first time when they're at happy hour with their friends, and then they'll say, "I like this. I want something stronger." Anything stronger, anything beyond beverage will be in dispensaries. So that's our sort of talking point around that, and I believe that to be true. Dispensaries are still trying to figure out their take on it.
And just generally looking at hemp across the US state by state, I'm really interested in what's happened in Texas over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Do you think he's made the right decision by stepping in and doing an EO and trying to apply some brakes on the more radical capitalist approach to selling this stuff? Because the more you don't apply the brakes, the more issues you're going to have further down the line, which are going to affect the way that the general populace think about these products, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think there's much I agree with the governor of Texas on at all, but I do think that we need guidelines around the sale of controlled substances, including cannabis, in our country.
No, no,
And
no.
so
Regulation isn't such a bad thing, is it?
yeah, regulation, I think some of what he's pushing for makes a lot of sense. Age gating, absolutely. We can't have 15-year-olds buying intoxicating hemp products from, testing, uniform labeling, product restrictions so things aren't 1,000 milligrams. I mean, absolutely. So I really think it's a step towards common sense regulation there. Are they going to take it too far? Are they going to try to, I don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle entirely, but I do think some basic framework for responsible sales of intoxicating hemp absolutely makes sense in Texas.
Well, Brian, I think that basically covers everything I wanted to ask you about what you're trying to do. I suppose it's a one-word answer. Are you, as you say, you've been at it 21 years. Are you more positive this year than last year about the way holistically the cannabis and hemp sectors are developing in the States? Or, are you worried? Because sometimes when I report on this stuff daily, and you see all the news, and there's a push and pull going on because there is a new war on drugs mentality and other things happening. And I wonder whether that will leak into this regulated sector that people like yourselves have spent a very long time getting to this point. But there does seem that push pull at the moment.
Yeah, short answer, yes, I feel more positive now than I did a year ago about the future of cannabis reform. There's some concerns I have about our country more broadly, but
Yes.
I think generally, you have states looking to regulate intoxicating hemp. You have more and more states legalizing, medicalizing, and then you have fairly nuanced comments coming out of the Trump administration about wanting to help small businesses and understanding that cannabis is not as bad as Schedule I substances. We haven't got rescheduling, we haven't got any real reform, but they seem to be saying and indicating the right things. So I'm hopeful that will lead to some federal reform, and then we'll just keep pushing at the state level until we get what we want.
Before we go, I did have one other question. You've done a lot of, like you've got a lot of guys working for you in a lot of states. You've done 20 years that your firm now, probably one of the longest running firms. Are you looking as a firm to work more outside the US in other markets as you move forward? Because the US still has the intellectual property inside people like your heads is just eons ahead, Star Trek worlds ahead of anywhere else on the planet. And it seems such a shame that everything that you guys have been through isn't being shared as much as I believe it should be with other jurisdictions who you already see saying making the same mistakes, not so much Colorado, but let's use California and New York as perfect examples of a hamster wheel of mistakes that could easily be avoided if they actually looked at common sense states like Colorado, Oregon, and Washington.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, our firm stays very, very busy domestically here. We do some work abroad. We increasingly get more and more inquiries, but I think a lot of our future is really continuing to make sure things are done right here. And then, consulting in other countries and helping the world move forward with common sense cannabis policy would be a wonderful thing to do.
Well, that's a great way to end. Common sense cannabis policy is words I love to hear, and I don't often hear at the moment. So thank you very much for that, Brian. Okay, well, thank you very much for being on the Koala podcast and talking about the Colorado Hemp Beverage Coalition. There'll be anybody listening, there'll be lots